Welcome back to Stage Management. We've entered a new module. This is one of my favorite parts of the production process, and that's auditions. Let's talk a little bit about how auditions affect you as the stage manager, the performer, and the director or the casting director. So, let's think. So, the multiple people involved in this process are you, the stage manager, the director, the performer, the casting agent, if there is one, the location in which the casting is happening, especially if you're doing this in a studio. So let's consider all those different variables. I'm going to pause for a moment and allow you to write them down or type them out. In the discussion board for this week, I'd like for you to list some of those things that you've come up with about the different variables and how potentially auditioning in a rented space might be different than auditioning someone in a company-owned space, or perhaps how auditioning someone in-house, like we do here at Shenandoah, is different than going on an audition tour. An audition tour is done by Shenandoah Summer Music Theater. Many of you might know it as SSMT. So all of these things are certainly options to consider and something to really think about as you prepare for an audition. Now, this week we're also going to continue and finish up on Monday with taping our floor. We're not going to get through the whole taping, but I want us to get enough that we really start to see a set there, rather than just some angles and points. One thing that I want you to take away from that is that with a Vectorworks file or an AutoCAD file from your designer, your scenic designer, you can very easily and quickly replicate a floor, but it does take some kind of knowledge and some kind of prep work. The other thing that I'd like for you to think about as it relates to last week and this week is how does preparing the room and preparing a call board relate to preparing for auditions and running auditions, right? So that's something else I'd like for you to help add to our discussion this week. What is the difference between preparing for auditions and preparing for a rehearsal? Or preparing for a rehearsal space, rather. Now, something else as it relates to auditions that isn't quite mentioned in the text, but I do want to talk about. What do we do when we have to do auditions in non-ideal situations and non-ideal circumstances? Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what I actually mean is if you have to audition somebody in a private office or in a hotel room or any of those kind of situations, how do we make the performer feel comfortable? Because, frankly, auditioning someone in a hotel room is a very common occurrence. However, at the same time, it really does make people uncomfortable because you're going into a private hotel room. It's not the most confidence-inspiring experience, especially for a young performer. It's perfectly professional and perfectly normal for this to happen, but it's something where we, as the stage manager, need to figure out how to make that a better experience and a more streamlined experience for the performer so they're at ease and they can audition just as best as they possibly can. Another topic that I'd like for us to discuss today and throughout the week is what do you provide as a stage manager at an audition? Do you provide cough drops? Do you provide audition sides? What are you providing, right? So that's definitely a question, and it really, the answer depends on where you're working, who you're working for, what kind of a budget they gave you, because if they give you a budget for expendables and materials, well, that's a very easy answer. If they don't give you a budget for any of those things, that really informs your answer as well, right? So typically, I would say do not spend your own money on the show. Just like to say in the producers, don't spend your own money on the show, right? That's true. Because as you start to spend your own personal money on a show, it's going to start to become expected and it's going to start to become a problem. Because ultimately, especially when you start out, you're not necessarily going to be paid a tremendous amount of money to stage manage. And if you're spending significant amounts of money on comfort supplies for performers, you're not going to have that money at home to do what you want to do with it, or So in many cases, need to deal with it. So think about that, but think about sides and things, right? So if a performer needs audition sides or anything like that, how can you most effectively provide those, right? Do you want to have copies in the holding room or in the waiting room? Or are you going to distribute them on an as-needed basis, right? Again, that depends on your copy budget. It depends on a lot of other things. But it's definitely something to keep into consideration, or under consideration, rather. Another item that I'd like for you to think about this week is callbacks, right? How are callbacks handled, and how do you, as the stage manager, take on the role of notifying callback participants, people that need to be called back? How do you notify those unsuccessful candidates, people who didn't get the role? Because oftentimes, outside of academic situations, it's your job to call people and say that they either got the role or didn't get the role, or got a callback or didn't get a callback. So just keep those kind of things in mind. I think we're going to have a really great week, and I hope you enjoy week 4. Have a great time.